Good afternoon. This is Ingraham here. My role today, I'm going to be sharing information in my review of a dissertation. I got to tell you, this was a very interesting assignment and process. Working on a dissertation is one thing, but then taking the time to review a dissertation and try to critique something that someone else has done that you're doing is an interesting perspective. It's an interesting process. So here it goes. The dissertation that I chose to review was done at Nova Southeastern University, which is where I'm studying. The name of the dissertation is called A Comparison of Faculty Policy in Private, Virtual, and Traditional Schools. This particular dissertation I found to be interesting, having worked in a public university setting and also having worked in the K-12 setting educationally as an administrator. This was really interesting, looking at information with regards to instructional technology and the policy perspective itself. Overall, I think that the dissertation was well written. I think that it positively contributed to the overall educational environment. I found in my research that a quality dissertation and the purpose of a dissertation should be to research a problem, and that a dissertation should add relevance to the field. The dissertation is also a chance for a researcher to show their ability to investigate a subject with expertise. This is what the University of Arizona and their global campus tells us. In order for a dissertation to be successful, there should be a level of passion that the researcher brings to the academic work. In doing anything, if you don't have passion coupled with competence, then you're going to have nonsense, okay? And so this is why the relationship between the researcher and the dissertation chair is so important. The chair is the leader of the dissertation. And so when there's passion there, this will lead to a good working relationship. That's what the literature tells us. And so this positive and clear relationship was evident within this particular study. In regards with the introduction of the statement and the statement of the problem, I believe that in this dissertation, this information was clearly defined. The researcher did an adequate job of expressing a need for new policies governing the faculty due to increased enrollment in virtual schools. I also believe that the researcher gave an insightful explanation as to the importance of the correlation between virtual high schools and the establishment of other types of online schools. This showed the relevance between the connection of how an online learning environment shifted and how it developed a culture for the entire organization of the school. Additionally, the researcher adequately showed the significance and the purpose of the study, which is important to do within any dissertation work. Specifically, he showed that the rate of pay increased by 25% for online teachers. This led to influencing the policies that were put in place for teachers. So it's important because this shows the nature of the teaching in an online environment and how that differentiates itself from teaching in a traditional environment. When we took a look at the literature review of the dissertation, I believe that the researcher did a great job of establishing the importance of policy as it relates to the functionality of teachers in an online learning environment. The researcher further shared information through the literature on how the connection between the teacher and their students may have impacted different policies that were put in place. Additionally, the researcher showed that using the systems theory management and that this process of how teachers teach online isn't necessarily the end-all be-all of everything, but it's just as important when it comes to teachers delivering information. So, in fact, this is a critical point which suggests in the literature that faculty must be governed by the nuances of their environment and not necessarily by the way in which they teach. They've got to pay attention to the needs of their students in order for their teaching to meet the needs of their students. This is what the literature showed. Overall, a literature review generally should be able to provide a comprehensive and up-to-date review of literature on the topic as per Galvin and Galvin, okay? And I believe that this dissertation and this section of the dissertation was able to do that. Specifically in looking at the methods and design approach in terms of the application of how research and the methodology, more specifically, the methodology was taken on, I believe that the dissertation and this portion of it was well constructed and effectively implemented. In its deliberation, there was a clear emphasis on establishing why and how policy manuals were examined and developed. Additionally, within this dissertation, there were clear examples that were given of both public and private entities that they were utilized, and the dynamics of how information was clearly identified. So this is important because if you're going to understand the final point of what the dissertation and the researcher is trying to make, then the method that is used must be reflective within the process. It should be clear and understandable for those persons to be able to replicate what was done as a part of your study. So as we keep looking and reviewing this dissertation, specifically when we look at the results in the outcome section, I believe that this dissertation effectively established and showed all pertinent results from the research with regards to how the research related and showed a correlation between teacher and actual instructional development. So this was important because it showed how the superintendent of schools of traditional districts influence their culture of the organization. So, in other words, the individual needs of a teacher should also be connected to what the students are expecting to learn, okay? And so the policies of how teachers were able to deliver their instructional information correlated to how they practiced and shared that information, okay? So this is what the results of the study showed. And so looking at the last section of the dissertation, the discussion in the summary section, I believe that this section effectively showed the similarities and differences that were known to exist delineating traditional and virtual schools. This is an important aspect of dissertation because it reinforces the importance of policy as it relates to the nuances of the relationship between the teachers and their students. And so in looking at what an effective results and outcomes section of the dissertation would clearly state, you have to look at the findings that are within the literature. And I believe that this dissertation and this researcher did a good job of doing that. They showed that there was more variation between the types of virtual schools that were used and also the development and the functionality of the operations of these schools. Within the dissertation, this had a direct impact to the modality of delivery when it comes to the way that policy impacted teachers' educational standards. In other words, depending upon the environment that the teacher was in, this gave a clearer understanding or a line of sight on how they were going to develop and deliver their teaching style to their students, okay? In terms of there being a difference between being in a traditional environment and being in an online learning environment. So, in terms of writing style, any dissertation has to follow the pretenses of what the institution requires and the style that's given in the dissertation manual. And so for Nova Southeastern University, it would be the APA format. And so the APA format was consistent with the established guidelines as determined by the institution, and the appropriate version of the APA manual in terms of documentation was done correctly. Grammar and punctuation, word usage, placement, and spelling were all correctly utilized, and the narrative was logical and easy to follow. So overall, I believe that this dissertation was well written. I believe it was well implemented and presented in an academically insightful manner. However, given the nature of this topic, the manner in which the results were articulated, it could be determined that this dissertation only moderately contributed to the pertinent field of study. Nevertheless, I believe that it did showcase a good example of what the dissertation process should be. I believe that it was well done, and I believe that it has been executed in a good manner for other students and other potential researchers to follow. Thank you, and that's my assessment of this dissertation. Thank you.